In honor of this next Curiosity with a Course episode, which is about money, we are doing a little bit of an event and sale. But first, at the bottom of the website, you will find we now have donate buttons. You can donate in USD, dollars, or you can donate with Bitcoin. That's always there available for you if you want to support the show. We appreciate it. You can donate whatever you like. Also, if you want to support the show, you can go to the shop and pick yourself up a Curious t-shirt for $25. That includes shipping, handling, taxes, all that, whatever sizes, colors, whatever you want. It's there. But if you would like to get a t-shirt for $15 worth, you can do that. So you can either donate at the bottom, and anything more than $15 worth of Bitcoin will get you the shirt of your choice for that $15 worth of Bitcoin. Now, this doesn't work for USD. It's the only hitch here. You have to pay or donate in Bitcoin to get a $15 shirt, which is essentially how much it costs for me to get it to you. And it's so making zero profit on these. Maybe even negative profit. I might even be paying you to take a t-shirt, but you have to pay or donate with Bitcoin. So you can use this button at the bottom to donate. It'll create a drop-down box, set how much you want to donate, fill out your information, and then when you click this pay at the bottom, it'll pop up the window. If you're familiar with cryptocurrencies, it'll pop up a window with the address that you need to send your Bitcoin to. And make sure if you do the donate and you want a shirt, make sure you fill in all the information in this box. It tells you what item do you want, what size, color. Remember that. Or if you don't want a shirt, you just want to donate, like I said before, fantastic. Appreciate that. Or if you can also do it through the store. Pick your shirt, pick your color, pick your size, add to the cart. Boom. And then when you go to view your cart, you will fill out all of the pertinent information until you get down to step number 3, which is payment. And you click on manual payment, and you'll see a box that comes up here. It says click here to finish your payment. This will take you to a third-party Bitcoin transaction vendor. Fill all that out, fill in your order, and click continue to put your order in. So then you also get an email asking you to follow up to finish your payment. So you can either finish your payment on the screen or you can wait to get that email. But when you click that link, it's going to bring you to this website. And then you'll fill in your email, your name, your address, your order number, and then at the bottom you'll see it says pay 15 USD. And now that will allow you to send $15 worth of Bitcoin to the address it gives you, which will be the Chronic Curiosity crypto wallet. So the hitch here is if you do not know how to use Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies, or send these cryptocurrencies, that's the fun part. And that's what you have to figure out. But I will say this, make sure you're buying your cryptocurrencies. Make sure you're buying your Bitcoin. If you go through someplace like Robinhood or PayPal, those sites, you're not buying Bitcoin. You're giving them money so they can buy Bitcoin. There's a difference. If that means you don't own it. They own it. They just have your money. So now it's up to you to be curious enough to figure out how to buy and transact with Bitcoin. Get yourself a $15 shirt. And I hope maybe after you listen to this episode, if you're not considering it now, you might consider looking into it after this. If not for the $15 shirt, for your own curiosity. Enjoy. Nearly 5,000 years ago, the Mesopotamian shekel emerged, giving rise to, from our understanding, one of the first forms of currency, rather than bartering for our goods and services. In the 1800s, on the island of Yap, explorers discovered the native people on these islands used ray stones, which are circular discs of limestone with a hole through them, as a currency on the island. Since these natives had to travel a far distance through the ocean to mine this limestone, it had value to them. These explorers saw this as an opportunity to mine these stones with their more sophisticated tools and ships and trade them with the natives in exchange for work and supplies. By the early 1900s, ray stones were worthless due to the flood of stones brought by these outside sources. A similar story can be said with the agri beads of West Africa. Throughout history, there are countless accounts of seashells being used for monetary purposes, often devalued by outside peoples that had the increased capabilities to gather and bring these shells to areas to purchase goods or slaves, filling these local markets with what they first thought to be riches. Soon, overflooded these markets, making them worthless. 211 BC. The Roman denarius begins its story. Shortly after the Roman Empire began its massive expansion, for roughly 300 years, give or take, from 150 BC through 150 AD, the Roman Empire essentially controlled half of the world's power. 150 years later, by 300 AD, the denarius was all but worthless. After constant production and the lessening content of the silver in each piece, the people began to bartering and trading with hard goods and services as the Roman Empire was well on its way to collapse. From 1970 to 1973, Salvador Allende, the first Marxist elected president in Latin America, namely Chile, decreed many of the country's leading industries would be nationalized. With the government in charge of these businesses, they began to fail. So, the government printed to compensate for the deficits. There are hundreds of scenarios much like these throughout time, and many more recent than one might think. 2009. Satoshi Nakamoto, whereabouts and true identity unknown, credited with creating the Bitcoin, which has grown to a market cap evaluation of over $1 trillion US. The first cryptocurrency the world has ever known was created. Why is money so difficult to manage? Or, what even is it? Maybe a better question. Quick commercial break, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us on another episode of Curiosity with a Course. We don't do any additional ads or anything, but if you'd like to support the show, you can head to the website, chronic-curiosity.com. Go to the store. There's some t-shirts there, some different things you can get. Super comfortable t-shirts with some curious designs, as it were. And also, you can contact us if you have any questions or suggestions, any way to reach us, please do. So, hope you enjoy Curiosity with a Course. Why do we have jobs? Well, many could argue a multitude of points. For this question, we'll focus on the most basic as it relates in people's minds, at least in mine. To survive in our technological world, of course, we, at least in most of the world, no longer barter and trade the supplies and services we need to live. There are still some on Earth, naturally, that survive day to day by hunting, gathering, farming, collectively as a group of humans supplying their necessities. But for the most part, we live in a world that we cannot survive without the abilities of those around us. Or sometimes those halfway across the world. When was the last time you woke up in the morning, harvested and processed your own coffee beans for your morning pick-me-up? When, in its own right, if you don't know, it's a pretty fascinating process to check out. But, when's the last time you went out to your yard and picked up an egg from your chickens as well as butchered and processed a pig, picked a green pepper off of your plant, dug up the onion from the ground, and cooked it up, to make your Western omelet for breakfast. Of course, that would be after you finished processing your own cheese from the milk you received from the mammary glands of your animal of choice. Unless, of course, you're vegan, then your breakfast would slide more towards the gatherer side of existence rather than the hunter. But even then, your agricultural skills better be on point if you choose not to pick up your homestead and travel incessantly. And if your farming skills are exceptional and you'd like to stay rooted, then I hope you have also figured out how to fully protect yourself from the elements of whatever climate you might be in, as well as be satisfied with whatever cushiony comforts you're able to conjure up. Fun fact, alliteration is also an artifact of our astute ability to advance our affairs. Luckily, at least most of us would agree, we are living in a technological world. So how do we get these comforts of life? There's not one individual in the world today that could simultaneously provide basic food, shelter, water for them and their family while tending an entire farm of animals, let alone do all of that and create a smartphone from scratch. Even the smartphone itself is entirely not doable. We as humans have developed teamwork on a level the rest of the animal kingdom literally cannot understand. So we began sometime over 5,000 years ago building civilizations. I won't argue the time frame today. It's an entirely different episode and beyond. But we began to stop our hunting and gathering phase and creating an even larger collection of individuals. This allows us to all come together, work as a team, so no individual or local family has to complete all of these necessary chores. While still bartering with goods, items began to make a rise to make exchanging those goods and services easier. Imagine if you were a construction worker and completed a job for a farmer that was worth 2 cows, but you had no means to take care of those 2 cows. Now you have to find somebody who wants to buy the cows from you so you can transfer it into something you do need. So bartering became more unified little by little throughout the years, whether it be the ray stones of the Yap Islands, agri beads, seashells, the Roman denarius, or the US dollar. Money was created in order to make acquiring goods and services and trading these goods and services a little easier. Much to human nature and the saying, the love of money is the root of all evil. Where there is money to be made, it's surely to find a human that will exploit it. So, what is money? Simply, it's whatever people believe it to be, that they can trade for goods or services, and that the other person will accept, so they can use it for some other good or service. Something only has worth if someone believes it does, and they are willing to do something to acquire said thing. I often think of the phrase, you couldn't pay me to do X, Y, or Z. So not only is X, Y, or Z not worth the amount of money tied to it, it actually has a negative value to that person. While someone else may do that very same thing just for pure enjoyment. We have as humans just collectively decided what something is or isn't worth by the ones willing to do or acquire said thing. Most of you would think a job just to do for a certain amount of money. So we could turn around and spend the money we earned on the things that have value to us. Isn't that why we have jobs, to earn money so we can spend it on the things that are important to us? They don't call it work for no reason. But this has facilitated this medium of exchange. In addition, if where there is money to be created, someone will inevitably take advantage of it, or possibly try their best to get you to give it up freely. How often do we spend money on things we don't truly need? Or, when we level with ourselves, even really want? Money has been many things through time. And as we establish, it's nearly impossible to not have to worry about it in some regard. Unless you take a nihilistic approach to money, it's beneficial to understand how it works within its designated system. I'm a firm believer in the statement, money can't buy happiness. There are a few things in this world that money indeed cannot buy. But this episode is not about finding your inner peace. I wish I could break that down into simplistic terms, or at least attempt to. But that would be quite presumptuous of me. I barely understand money, let alone the inner workings of what makes humans happy on a grand scale. But I can tell you that the more I understand about financial literacy, the happier I am, as I gain a tiny bit more control of my environment. And isn't that one of the things we all want in a world that's truly uncertain? Just a fraction of control. Being able to feel a little more confident as we move through our day-to-day. While I myself am typically a, fly by the seat of my pants kind of person, I would implore you to attempt to at least understand the things around you a bit more. Not just understanding them to have the knowledge, but how it applies to you. Things get more interesting when you have some skin in the game. And I promise you, you may not see it, but the complicated things around you are tapped into your life more than most realize. So I'll preface the rest of this episode with the statement that none of this is investment advice or advice of any kind. I am not certified to give investment advice and do not intend to do so. Rather than, I'm just trying to scratch the surface of some ideas that swirl around in the financial airspace and how they could maybe apply to your life. So imagine for a moment, 10 years from now, you could be making twice as much as you are. 20 years, twice that much. That sounds good, right? But many people, you're caught up in the day-to-day, think, there's no way I have to go back to school, or I have to move here or there, or I'd have to work twice as many hours, or something completely different. Who knows? Many people get stuck in a rut that they never get out of. While many people, you're happy with the rut they're in, which if that's what you want to do, more power to you. Being happy, truly happy, can be the greatest outcome in life. So I don't besmirch you for that. But even if you don't want to work super hard, extra hours, extra schooling, we can all benefit from a better understanding and making better decisions. That's how the wealthy, or at least the financially comfortable, become so. Good financial decisions. Now, there's obviously a slew of complexity there, with trust fund kids and hitting the lottery, or just pure corruption. But there are some fundamentals that are built into the system. I remember the first time I heard someone mention that paying off your house loan could be a bad idea. I thought that was ridiculous. Growing up, not financially well off, to say the least, my idea of financial freedom was being able to eat some decent food, have my monthly bills paid on time, and if I got a really good job and was really smart with my money, I'd be able to pay off my house and live debt-free before I retired. And if I had accomplished that, I would be more successful than I ever imagined. Now, the concept behind not paying your house is going back to understanding what money is in the system it lives in. So we're going to use some very basic numbers in this just to try to make it easy on the brain, because following the numbers can still be complicated. And all these numbers can change, but the principle is still the same. Let's lay out some scenarios. If you bought a house, say for $100,000, with a 5% interest rate on your loan, with a 30-year mortgage, and paid your monthly bill for that 30 years, you would end up paying $193,000 for that $100,000 house, the loan. Now, let's say you paid an extra $100 a month on top of your mortgage. You'd end up paying that loan off in just short of 21 and a half years at a total of $163,000. So you saved $30,000 on that house. Essentially paid $163,000 for that $100,000 house. Sounds pretty cool. Now, what if you were to take that $100 a month you paid extra on the house and invested it into a market? And this is where it gets a little sketchy in most people's minds, which rightfully so, because markets can move around and they aren't always stable. There's a lot that goes into this, but this is about making you curious. So, on average, the S&P 500, which is a sector of the stock market, has had roughly a 6% return since 1991, 30 years ago. Now, that has put it wildly simple, but like I said, just trying to make this example as simple as possible. So say we take that $100 a month and invest it in that S&P, and we get a return of 6% on our money. So it's kind of like the reverse of your loan interest. You're getting 6% more instead of paying 6% more throughout the loan. And we didn't pay an extra on our house payment. So in that 30 years, we would have paid off our house at $193,000, and our $100 a month investment in that market that brought us that 6% return is now worth just over $95,000. While paying your house off earlier would have saved you $30,000, investing that $100 could make you more than 2 times that, depending on your interest rate and rate of return and your investments and those things. But to summarize, if you paid this house off in 30 years and invested $100 a month into an asset that appreciated by 6%, you would have paid $193,000 and now have $95,000 in the bank, as it were. Whereas if you put that $100 towards the house a month, you would have paid $163,000 for the house in 21 and a half years. So now what happens when you take that $100 that you were putting additional in the house and invest it for the rest of the 30 years in that 6% interest market? So you only have 8.5 years left before that 30-year mark. And that would leave you just under $12,000. So I know that's a lot of number. And you're more than willing to check my math, but I think I got it right. So with the first route, investing while paying your mortgage, you paid $193,000 and now you have $95,000 and the house to your name after 30 years. The second, you paid $163,000 and now have $12,000 and the house to your name after 30 years. Now, typically, unless you bought the house in a decent area and then 30 years later your neighborhood declined severely, your house would appreciate in cost. So we're going to add that in. So if you bought this house in 1991 and paid it off in 2021, the average inflation rate during that time is 2.45% for real estate. So now we're going to say that the house is worth $206,000. So let's review are 3 scenarios with these numbers in mind. Scenario A, you just pay for the house by monthly payments for 30 years. That's it. You paid $193,000, and after 30 years, the house is worth $206,000, a net equity or profit if you were to sell it of $13,000. Scenario B, you paid $100 extra on your payments and then took that $100 after you paid the house off and put it into an investment that got you 6% yearly returns. So you paid $163,000 for your now $206,000 house, equity $43,000, and gained additional savings return of $12,000. So your total net of profit, equity, whatever we're going to call it, is $55,000. So we have $13,000, $55,000. Scenario C, you paid normally monthly payments on the house and you put that $100 into an investment that you receive 6% returns on for 30 years. Well, you have the $13,000 equity from the house, like in scenario A, and you have your $95,000 return / savings on your investment with a total of net $108,000. So 13, 55, 108. That's almost double what you would have from scenario B. For just $100 a month. Granted, 30 years. Like I said, basic numbers. But this is the basic idea of what people mean when they say paying your house off early can be a bad idea when you choose to invest it wisely instead. Now, obviously, like I said, these numbers are all very basic and can change dramatically depending on your loan type, what you choose to invest in. But there's a reason this topic is discussed, because it is a very, very real situation that many people take advantage of. It's all about understanding, at least minimally, how financial structures and monetary systems work. So what is this magical thing called the S&P 500 and investments, the stock market, or even ridiculous notions of cryptocurrencies? I can assure you it's not magical, but we can think of the stock market much like a farmer's market, except all the vendors are selling or trading pieces of companies. You can go and purchase a piece of a company. It's stock. Like any market, is heavily driven off of supply and demand. If many people think a company is doing well or is worth owning, then they will buy its stocks. If less people are selling the stock than buying it, well, the price increases. Supply and demand. So the more value people see in a company, the more it'll be worth. Sounds a lot like our money talk in general. In a sense, stock of a company is a form of money, as long as someone is willing to trade whatever currency they hold dear to own it. Simplistically, the company or something else is worth more. Someone is willing to pay more for it. But what happens year after year when something doesn't really seem to be worth more than it once was, but it keeps costing more? You would think through the technological boom, most things would decrease in price because we have found more efficient ways to create them. Unfortunately, that's not always, or hardly ever, the case. I suppose, that statement is relative at best, but, arguments can continually be made as to why things become more expensive. Supply and demand, naturally, is a large one. Restrictions on companies that make manufacturing their goods more expensive. Workers demanding more money to buy more crap they don't need. In return, requiring the companies to increase the price of their products to pay their employees. Now, don't get me wrong here. I think a good worker should be paid well. And I, more often than I like to admit, will spend money on something I probably don't need. But it all boils down to one thing: inflation. When the money you're using to buy something buys you less and less of that something. In a study done by dollardays.org, they found that of 775 currencies around the world, there were some currencies not included, so maybe a grain of salt needed here, but it gives the big picture. 20% of these currencies were destroyed by hyperinflation, 21% by war, 24% through acts of reform, 12% through acts of independence, and only 23% of these are still in circulation. So with the average life expectancy for fiat currencies, which fiat currency means basically the official monies used by the government that don't really have any backing, it's just worth something because the government says so. That average lifespan is to be about roughly 27 years. So with the British pound sterling, the longest running or alive currency, to be a little over 326 years old, it has lost almost 100% of its value since 1694. The US dollar, being created on April 2nd, 1792, puts it at a ripe old age of 228 years old. With it once being backed by gold bars, that has been well forgotten at this point. And since then, it's only worth something because the rest of the world has been using the US dollar for most of its trade. And we won't get into the dirty laundry of the government and its wars and myriad of issues surrounding this, but it is curious to note in 2021 that through this entire time, 35% of all of the US dollars ever printed have been so in the last year. But why does that matter? Well, our old friend inflation, of course, tied in with supply and demand. So I'll attempt a simple analogy here. If you have 10 people that want to buy a certain car, and we'll say that car is worth $10,000, but only one of these people have $10,000 to spend. Simple. The one person that has the money gets it, right? Well, what if the government just prints a bunch of money and gives everyone $10,000? So now all 10 people have $10,000, with one individual having 20 now because he got or she got an additional $10,000. The person that currently owns the car, they hear about this and they decide, well, now I can double the price to $20,000 because the demand is there. All 10 people still want to buy the car, but now you only have one person with $20,000 that can buy the car, and 9 with $10,000 that still cannot afford said car. Now, obviously, that analogy is somewhat hyperbolic, but the idea still stands. This can be applied to bread, gasoline, just the same. Supply and demand are contingent on the worth of the money that is at stake. This is, and as we gave examples of in the beginning, additionally contingent on the conditions that arise when someone discovers ways to exploit these systems. We also won't get into the convoluted workings of the government and all of their industrial complexes, which can be simply disturbing. Maybe that'll be a different episode. But what do we do? How do we make sure our money and our time is worth something? That's obviously not an easy answer to give, but ultimately, it's understanding, at least on a basic level, of what we're really doing with our money. Financial literacy. If you zoom out on the monetary timeline and get a true grasp of the systems in place today in their infancy, it's easy to see these things can change rapidly. But for the most part, as our lives are concerned, if you're living in a fairly stable country, as we are in the US mostly, we're lucky enough to be able to look at little changes and the nuances and attempt to, kind of predict the future. We have seen this throughout the ages, as we've discussed, whether it be special rocks, which sounds silly, but how many people out there enjoy diamonds? And I know it's not technically a rock, but all it is a solid form of carbon, much like the graphite in a pencil. Or in other metals, silver, gold, have sure seen their share of the limelight, or even seashells, to art. Many are familiar with Edvard Munch's The Scream painting that was created in 1893. It sold a little while ago for $120 million, just under. A number that I'm sure is completely unfathomable by him when he painted it. So this goes to show that art and real estate can be used as a hedge against inflation. Now, this was another point my brain came to surprisingly one day, and this isn't a financial secret by any means. It was just was to me, a poor kid from the country, finally realizing it, that often these rich people aren't buying up art because they just so enjoy the nuances of the artist portrays about their existential crisis or whatever. It's all about the rarity of an item and how other people find it to be worth something. Stock to flow, supply and demand. The same for the real estate market. Sure, there's plenty of people buy famous works of art or fancy houses and fancy places just because they have the money and they want to show it off. But often people buy these things like land, art, old cars to hedge inflation as well. So hedging your bets, diversification, planning for the future can all be tied together. Don't place all of your money or livelihood on one thing, whether that be your job, which many people do, living paycheck to paycheck. If they were to lose their job, whether through their own fault or not, their life would be turned upside down. We saw this in 2020, which I won't get into that either, but many people were forced into poverty, essentially, not allowed to go to work, not allowed to earn a living. So don't put all your eggs in one basket, your job, your 401k, your stocks, or 13 black. Hedge your bets. Sure, it's great to keep some money under the mattress. But what if you had your whole life savings under the mattress? How much would that dollar buy you in 50 years? That's what some do with art, old cars, land, houses. It's not always because they just want to spend money on something. Rather, they don't want to waste their money. They are not buying something in that aspect. They are putting their money in a safe place where in time they could resell said item and it may be worth, quote unquote, worth more in dollars. Really, what they did was just store their wealth in a specific item. After inflation, maybe it doesn't provide you the ability to buy any more milk or bread, but it may provide you the opportunity to buy the same amount of milk or bread you could have bought 50 years ago. How much candy could a kid buy with a whole dollar 30 years ago versus today? Things are worth whatever enough people deem them to be worth, or whatever they think they might be worth in the future. So what's the difference? Why does it matter? Well, as we've mentioned, not everything holds its value through the rise and fall of civilizations and their currencies. Only a few things really stay constant. We really need the bare necessities to stay alive. And as humans, we have to do something to obtain the ability to acquire said things to stay alive. Whether that's hunting and gathering our food, or working a job in order to trade goods or services, or get paid in some type of monies. As we've established at this point, money is whatever people say it is. And whether it be fancy stones, art, real estate, or the stock market, these are all places people store their wealth to avoid inflation and acquire additional revenue. What about cryptocurrency? This has been an up and coming topic in the past few years, garnering criticism by experienced investors and the average person alike. I'm not going to say I'm unbiased about this topic as a whole, but I'll do my best to present the information without my biases seeping in too much to give those an overview of what all of this is about. So as mentioned in the beginning, Bitcoin was created in 2009 by a mysterious character, Satoshi Nakamoto. We'll focus on Bitcoin for this discussion, as it was the first cryptocurrency and is regarded by many one of the most important, if not the most important. And it has had most of the news coverage so far at this point. You've likely heard about it prior, particularly if you've listened to the show before. But as before, we will discuss this in simple terms, if possible. So if you read something or somebody says something that may sound contrary, I'm just trying to give a general view of this. So Bitcoin is essentially a reward that is given to Bitcoin miners that operate within its designated blockchain. A blockchain is a database that holds information. As new information is created or recorded, it's added in blocks, creating a chain of blocks of information, hence the name. Bitcoin miners use a computer, and often now a very large amount of special computers, to solve difficult math problems. And as they solve these problems, this program that was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, a block is written to the chain, and then they're rewarded with a Bitcoin. So it's much like mining for gold. The computer is the tools, the math problems are the ground it's being dug up, and the Bitcoin is the gold. So once these Bitcoins are mined, they can be sold if someone wants to buy them. They can also be broken down into smaller pieces called Satoshis. So you don't have to buy or use an entire Bitcoin in a transaction. So if you haven't made the connection yet, a Bitcoin is just like anything else we've discussed so far, except in a digital form. Almost like a song or a video game or anything you can download and transfer around digitally. If someone is willing to pay for it, that's the key. And this goes for all cryptocurrencies. Now, there's a lot of discussion around cryptocurrencies with many governments looking to build their own. And when you think about it, the idea is not that far-fetched. Not that much different than online banking, online purchasing, and the like. We are, after all, digitally transferring money through the internet. We just don't often consider the fact that it's, for the most part, numbers on a screen that get transferred around. That we could technically go to a bank and get our essentially worthless pieces of paper that represent our money. All because the government says it's worth something. And we as people around the world just subscribe to it. So when considering cryptocurrencies, it's not hard to imagine that one day we may be using them, particularly considering the blockchain technology. I won't get into it, but blockchain can be infinitely more secure and faster. Regardless of the cryptocurrencies, the blockchain technologies will be a step into the future. But what makes Bitcoin so special? In my mind, it is the essential definition of decentralized. It does not rely on any single person or source or government. And the rules can't be changed by any 1, 2, 3, 4, or even way more people. It's incredibly safe against attack, at least for now. Maybe if someday, quantum computers become a reality. If that were to happen, our entire lives would be changed dramatically. Regardless, you can't be scammed out of your Bitcoin, or it can't be stolen unless you do something for that to happen, unlike credit card fraud. And while most would agree they don't see Bitcoin replacing any fiat currency, it's still much faster to transfer to whoever, wherever you like. And it has been likened to replacing gold as a store of value by many top investors. And the big difference here is that decentralization. Nobody runs it. Nobody owns it. It's a collective. There's no government that can just spit more out, which is maybe even more important. There are a limited number of Bitcoin to be mined, 21 million precisely, and there will never be more. The program can't be changed. At this time, there are a little over 18.5 million mined to date, leaving only 2.5 million left to bring into circulation. Due to its program, the last Bitcoin won't be mined until around the year 2040, likely. Now, you may have heard in the news that the leader of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has made Bitcoin legal tender. This means that its residents are now able to use Bitcoin to trade for goods and services officially. Along with this news cycle, you may have seen multiple sources saying that this is a power move, or he is messing with democracy, or that it'll wreck the country. Now, I would ask you to consider who is saying these things. The U.S. central banks, the ones that have a large incentive for other countries to use the dollar for their trade. You can find plenty of people accusing that this is one reason why the U.S. took out Saddam Hussein. He began trading oil in currency other than the U.S. dollar right around that time. Yet another rabbit hole we won't explore today, though. Or is it the IMF, International Monetary Fund, who also have deep-rooted ties with the typical financial systems in place around the world? I would suggest at least considering not just the news stories you're reading, but who is writing it and why? What are their motives, maybe? Additionally, considering that China has recently ramped up its campaign to ban Bitcoin mining and its use within the country. Considering some of these thoughts, which I would argue don't even begin to scratch the surface, ask yourself, if you had all, or at least most of the world's power in your hands, money is power after all, what would you have to gain from your form of control being transformed to a currency that cannot be altered, controlled, or more of it created when you find yourself in hot water? Money is, after all, whatever the people are willing to trade back and forth, or what the people are forced to use. And the key factor in my mind for Bitcoin is through understanding our history and our potential future trajectory. Monetary systems have risen and fell countless times. We are on a rocket ship towards a technological future. Adding to what we've discussed earlier, with the government to have the ability to print more money anytime it feels like. Remember, supply and demand is a pivotal factor of value. So if you can understand the vast changes in our lives in the past 100 years due to technology, even 50 years, to think that we aren't on an exponential curve of technological change, it kind of seems silly. So, will cryptocurrency dramatically change our financial future? Many will speculate. But unless you're from the future, no one can truly know. But if you're looking to better your future, at least financially, then it would behoove you to learn how to do so, rather than just be hopeful. As the saying goes, wish in one hand, shit in the other. See which one gets filled first. Oh, and if you are from the future, you are officially invited to come on the show. We would be delighted to talk to you.